My name is Julia, and I am 27 years old. I work as an interior designer at a small design firm in Seattle. It's the kind of job that keeps me busy. The days are long, full of meetings, design projects, and deadlines that seem to come at me faster than I can handle. But despite the chaos of it all, I love it. It's one of the few things in my life that I can truly say I chose for myself. Everything else? Well, it's not so simple. My family doesn't see me that way. They don't see the real Julia, the one with her own career, dreams, and life. I'm just Julia. The younger sister, the aunt, the one who's always there to fill in, to help when someone's needed. That's the role I've been stuck in for as long as I can remember. I have an older sister named Melissa. She's 4 years older than me, married, with 3 6-year-old boys, triplets. They're full of energy, always in motion, and to say that raising them is a handful would be an understatement. Melissa is the kind of person who makes the world revolve around her. She doesn't have to try, it just happens. She's confident, assertive, and everyone seems to fall in line with her. My parents, especially, think this is how things should be. They don't question it, and then there's me. The one who never quite gets her turn. The one who's expected to take care of everything when no one else can. My role? The backup. Babysit when I'm free. Babysit when I'm tired. Babysit even when I want to do something for myself. I'm always the last person on the list, always second to everything else. It's like being invisible, but not really. I'm seen, but not for who I really am, just for what I can give. Last year, my family planned a vacation to the Oregon coast. I was excited about it. I had asked for time off at work, eager to finally have a break. I imagined long, peaceful walks along the beach, cozy mornings in seaside cafes, and visiting an art exhibit I'd wanted to see for years. This vacation was going to be mine. No distractions, no responsibilities. Just time for me. Mom took care of the hotel arrangements for the whole family, and she promised me that this time I'd finally get to relax. It sounded perfect. A real getaway. But when we got there, things didn't go as planned. I found out I would be sharing a room with the 3 boys. Meanwhile, Melissa and her husband had their own suite, with an ocean view balcony. I barely had time to react before Mom handed me the room key, saying, "The boys love you, Julia. They won't be any trouble." I'm sure you can guess how it went. The first night, one of the boys cried over a missing teddy bear. Another one ran around the room looking for the TV remote. The third asked me 5 times if he could have snacks at midnight. I was exhausted and barely slept. All I could hear were heavy breaths and little snores in the dark, and all I wanted was a moment of peace. The next day, I hoped to at least have a couple of hours to visit the art exhibit I'd been looking forward to. But just as I was finishing getting dressed, Melissa texted me, "Where are you going?" "Josh is about to head out. Can you watch the kids for a bit?" That bit turned into nearly 3 hours. When I tried to talk to Mom about it, she gently said, "You're staying for free, sweetie. It's only fair you help out a little." I wanted to scream. I wasn't mooching off anyone. I have a job, I'm independent, I paid for my own bus ticket, and I took time off work to be here. But every time I tried to stand up for myself, I was met with disapproving looks. I felt small. Invisible. This was supposed to be my vacation, yet all I could think about was how my time was never truly my own. As the days went on, the trip only seemed to get worse. I tried to let things slide, telling myself it was just a family vacation, that I should suck it up and make the best of it. But the truth was, I couldn't anymore. I felt like I was being suffocated by my family's expectations. I was always the one who had to give, the one who had to help, the one who had to step aside to make room for everyone else. Melissa spent her days indulging in spa treatments, visiting cafes, and posting pictures of herself looking perfectly relaxed. Meanwhile, I spent most of my time cleaning up after the kids. Changing their clothes, and answering a never-ending stream of questions. Aunt Julia, can I have snacks? Aunt Julia, where's my toy? Aunt Julia, I need you to tie my shoes. It felt like I was constantly on call, never able to have any time to myself. By the end of the trip, I was mentally and physically drained. The beach I had been so excited to visit? I only made it once. The art exhibit I had looked forward to for months? I never even saw it. The vacation had become just another reminder of how little my needs mattered in the grand scheme of things. I tried to speak up. I really did. But every time I said something, I was shut down, dismissed, or simply ignored. At one point, I spoke to my mom about how I was feeling, how I needed space, and how the whole trip had turned into a nightmare for me. Her response? You're staying for free, sweetie. Just help out. It's only fair. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just about the trip anymore. It was about something much bigger. This was my life. I was constantly giving, constantly sacrificing my time, my energy, and my peace of mind for others. And for what? A few thank yous? A few pats on the back? It wasn't enough anymore, but I was too afraid to stand up for myself. Every time I did, I was met with disappointment, guilt, and shame. I felt like I was disappointing my family, like I was letting everyone down. When we got home, things returned to their usual rhythm. My family expected things to go back to normal, but I couldn't. I couldn't go back to being the same person who put everyone else's needs before mine. This time, I was done. The following year, when another family trip was planned, I told myself that I wasn't going to let the same thing happen again. I wasn't going to be the backup plan, the one who was always available, always sacrificing my happiness for everyone else. But my family didn't see it that way. They had already planned everything, booked the rooms, and sent out the itinerary like it was just another year. And the worst part? No one had even asked me what I wanted. I had spent the entire year trying to avoid the inevitable. I knew what was coming. I knew that once again, I would be roped into the same role I had always played. The one who was supposed to be the helping hand, the one who gave without asking for anything in return. But this year, I had had enough. I sat in the family group chat, staring at the message my mom had sent. It was a simple message: summer trip. We're all going together, just like every year. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. My heart raced. They really thought I would just fall into the same old role again, didn't they? I started typing a response, my fingers shaking. But this time, I wasn't going to stay silent. This time, I was going to stand up for myself. I took a deep breath and typed out, "Thanks, Mom, but this year I'll be driving myself. I've already booked my own room." The message sent, and just like that, I had said it. I had finally said no. The reaction was immediate. Less than 3 minutes after sending my message, my phone rang. It was Mom. "Julia, what are you saying? Why book your own room? I've already arranged everything." I could feel my heart racing in my chest. I took a deep breath and responded, trying to keep my voice calm and steady. "Mom, I want my own space. Last year I barely had a minute to myself, and I need a real vacation." There was a long silence on the other end, and then I heard her voice soften, but I could sense the disappointment. "But that means you're separating from the family. Melissa will have to handle the kids on her own, and who will help when she needs a break?" I bit my lip, feeling the sting of her words. But I wasn't backing down. "I'm not the nanny, Mom," I said, keeping my voice firm. "I work, I earn my own money, I'm an adult. And this time, I'm not repeating last year's mistake." The silence that followed was heavy, but this time, I felt different. I felt empowered. I knew I was doing the right thing, even if it meant disappointing my family. That night, Melissa sent me a long message, her words dripping with emotion. She said she was overwhelmed and tired and that she felt betrayed by my decision. "I'm still single with no kids," she said, "so helping out is the least I could do." I didn't reply immediately. I knew I needed time to think, to calm down. But then I saw the part of her message where she said, "I just wanted us all to have a fun family vacation and now you're acting like you've been deeply wronged." That was the moment it clicked. I wasn't just upset about the vacation. I was upset about the entire dynamic of my family, the way I had been taken for granted for so long, how I had always been expected to give without ever receiving anything in return. It was time to stop apologizing for wanting to live my own life. 3 days later, Dad called me. His voice was calm, but I could hear the concern behind it. "Are you really planning to go separately?" he asked. "Yes, Dad. I've booked a nearby hotel, but a private room. I'll join the group activities, but the rest, I want to decide for myself." There was a pause before he spoke again. "Melissa's really upset, you know. I used to be upset too, Dad," I said quietly. But no one seemed to notice. He didn't say anything at first, and I thought he might try to convince me to change my mind, but then he sighed. "I get it." The days leading up to the trip were filled with tension. Melissa sent one last message in the group chat, making her displeasure known. "Have your personal vacation, Julia, but don't expect the family to be happy if you skip everything just because you want freedom. You don't get to do that." I didn't reply, but I made one more change. I added an extra layer of privacy protection to my hotel booking. I was going to do this on my own terms, and no one was going to guilt me into playing the same role again. When the day finally arrived, I left early. The air was cool and fresh, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. My suitcase sat neatly in the back seat, and my favorite playlist played softly as I drove away from the city. This was my time, not for anyone else. I checked into my hotel, relieved to be on my own. As I settled into the room, I finally felt a wave of peace. This trip wasn't about babysitting or suppressing my own needs for the sake of others. It was about me, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't apologizing for it. The family vacation was about to begin. And my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't my mom. It was Melissa. She was calling me at 6 a.m., just as I was having coffee on my hotel balcony, the sun barely peeking over the horizon. "Did you write that?" she demanded, her voice sharp and full of disbelief. I knew exactly what she was talking about, the Reddit post I had shared about last year's vacation. I had been anonymous, but there was no mistaking the details. I stayed calm as I could. I said slowly, "But you made me a joke in front of thousands. Do you know how many people are calling me selfish now?" There was a long pause, and I could feel her fury through the phone. She wasn't hurt this time. She was angry. "You destroyed my image, Julia. You humiliated me in front of the entire world." I didn't answer right away. I wanted to tell her how I felt, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. She wasn't upset about the truth. She was upset because her image had been damaged. "Melissa, I didn't make anyone say anything," I said, my voice calm but firm. "They're reacting to what they read, and what I wrote was the truth," she cried. Not with hurt, but with fury. "You humiliated me in front of everyone," she repeated, her voice cracking. "I've been juggling 3 kids while you have all the freedom in the world. How can you do this to me?" I listened to her, and my heart sank. But I didn't back down. "You chose motherhood, Melissa. I respect that. But you can't expect me to sacrifice my life just because you're unhappy with the one you've chosen." There was silence on the other end. For the first time, I wasn't the one apologizing. I had finally found my voice, and it wasn't going to be silenced again. Later that day, I received another call from my mom. Her tone was different now, more cautious. "Julia, what are you doing? Melissa is really hurt. Couldn't you be a little more flexible?" I took a deep breath, preparing myself to explain again. "Mom, last year, I was as flexible as I could be. I gave up my time, my energy, my freedom. I didn't sleep properly, and through all of that, you never once asked me if I was okay. You only asked if I could help Melissa." There was silence on the other end. She didn't argue, didn't say anything for a moment. Then, she sighed. "You've changed, Julia." "Mom, I've grown up. By now, I knew I wasn't just fighting for my freedom, I was fighting for my own sense of self-respect. The vacation had started as something I was supposed to do for others, but it had become a symbol of everything I had allowed myself to be for too long, a backup plan, a second choice, someone whose needs were always pushed aside. I wasn't just fighting for rest anymore, I was fighting for my right to be heard, my right to say no, my right to set boundaries. 3 days later, Dad called me. His voice was gentle, and I could tell he was trying to tread carefully. "Are you really planning to go separately?" he asked. "Yes, Dad," I replied, my heart pounding in my chest. "I've booked a nearby hotel, but a private room. I'll join the group activities, but the rest I want to decide for myself." There was a long pause. Then, I heard him sigh. "Melissa is really upset, you know," I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I used to be upset too, Dad. But no one seemed to notice." "I get it," he said quietly, and with those 3 words, something inside me shifted. It was the first time anyone in my family truly acknowledged my feelings. That night, I received a text from Josh, Melissa's husband. He wasn't angry, just apologetic. "I'm sorry for letting you be taken advantage of," he wrote. "I'm talking to Melissa. I think she needs to change." I sat there, stunned. For the first time in years, I felt like someone in my family had my back. Not out of obligation, not for the sake of peace, but because they saw the truth. The days that followed were filled with tension. Melissa didn't reach out to me directly again, but her passive-aggressive comments were still coming through in the family group chat. The tension was thick, but I kept reminding myself that this was for my peace of mind, for my happiness. I had already made my decision. Then, just as I was settling into my new sense of peace, I got another message from my mom. This time, it was brief, but its impact was like a cold punch to my stomach. "Julia, the vacation's cancelled." I froze. The words felt heavy, but they didn't shock me. In a way, I expected this. Part of me felt a deep sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted. But another part of me was tinged with sadness. I had longed for a vacation for myself, after all this sacrifice. But instead of gaining that freedom, I was paying the price for the truth being exposed too quickly, too loudly. The call from my mom that followed was full of disappointment, and I could feel the undertone of frustration. "Since your post, Melissa hasn't really spoken to anyone. Josh got so upset he went to stay with his parents in Olympia. Your dad and we need time to reflect." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about the vacation anymore. It was about everything. The silence, the resentment, the unspoken emotions that had been festering for years. My family was in turmoil, and I wasn't sure whether it was worth it. 3 days later, I got a message from Josh. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when I read his words, it felt like a breath of fresh air. "I'd like to meet in person. Just you and me, not through Melissa, not through your parents." We met at a quiet cafe not far from my hotel. Josh arrived on time, looking tired but with a sense of clarity in his eyes. It was like the years of awkwardness and avoidance had finally dissolved. There was no pretense, no posturing. Just honesty. "Thank you for being brave enough to speak up," he said as soon as he sat down. I smiled faintly, surprised by the sincerity in his words. "I knew Melissa had control issues," he continued. "But I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. I didn't even need to ask what was really going on." I shook my head slightly. "I don't blame you," I replied. "But it's hard to believe you didn't notice." Josh lowered his gaze and sighed. "She told me she'd given you money. Even described it in detail, cash in an envelope left on the kitchen counter. Every time I asked, she had a reason." I felt a dry laugh escape me. "If there was an envelope, it must have been meant for someone else." Josh looked at me seriously. I checked the bank statements and asked Melissa directly. "She admitted she only gave you money for pizza a couple of times. The rest, she kept for herself." The disappointment in my heart deepened, but I didn't feel anger anymore. "Just sadness." "I love Melissa, Julia," Josh said, his voice soft. "But I won't let her walk all over you just because you speak up less." I looked him in the eyes, my mind racing. "So what are you going to do?" Josh's answer was calm, but determined. "I'm going to make her apologize properly. And I'll make sure she pays you back everything she owes." I didn't answer immediately. I was still processing everything, still questioning whether this was the real change I had been hoping for. Just a few hours later, Melissa showed up at my hotel. She was holding an envelope and her eyes were red, a sign that she had been crying. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For taking advantage of your kindness. For lying. And for turning a family vacation into a stage to control you." I remained silent as I looked at her. The weight of her words hung in the air, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to say anything back. She handed me the envelope. "This is the money I owe you. Every cent." "Josh made me recalculate all of it," she said, her voice steady but with a hint of remorse. I didn't open the envelope. I just looked at her. "Do you think things can ever go back to the way they were?" She shook her head, her shoulders slumping. "No," I exhaled softly. "And I think maybe that's a good thing." For the first time, Melissa didn't argue. She didn't try to manipulate or control me. She simply accepted what was happening. Melissa's admission of guilt was a turning point. It wasn't just about the money, the vacation, or even the family dynamics. It was about the change that had begun in all of us, even if it was uncomfortable at times. I had stood up for myself, and for the first time, I wasn't just fighting for peace, I was fighting for respect, for acknowledgement, and for the right to choose what my life would look like. That evening, I received a message from Josh. "Melissa's been to 4 therapy sessions now," he said. "And she's starting to get it. She's starting to listen, and for the first time, I don't think it's all about her anymore." I smiled faintly. It wasn't a perfect situation, and the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But it felt like the beginning of something real. Something that wasn't just about appeasing others. It was about healing, both for me and for Melissa. The changes I had longed for were beginning to take shape, albeit slowly. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of emotions, reflection, and healing. I was still processing the moment when I stood my ground, when I said no for the first time in years. I had never realized how deeply my silence had shaped me, how my ability to please others had kept me trapped in roles I never chose for myself. Now, for the first time, I was free of that burden. As the weeks passed, I began to notice small changes in my family. My mom started to call me, but instead of asking for help or giving me assignments, she would say, "Julia, do you want to join us for dinner tonight?" There was no mention of needing me to babysit or do something for Melissa. The questions were simple, and they felt like invitations to be a part of the family, not an obligation to fulfill a role. Even Dad seemed to have softened. He started sending me pictures of the garden bench he was working on, instead of asking me to help with it. It wasn't much, but it was a start. For the first time in my life, I was being treated as an equal, as an adult with my own life, not just as a backup plan for when things got difficult. But it wasn't just my parents who were changing. Melissa's behavior shifted, too. She started seeing a therapist, something Josh had suggested. I didn't know if it was because of my post or if it was just time for her to confront her own issues. But either way, she was taking a step, and I could feel the tension between us loosening. There was still a lot of work to be done, but I wasn't carrying the weight for both of us anymore. And that felt liberating. One afternoon, a message from Josh arrived. It was simple, yet profound. "Melissa's starting to understand, Julia. It's slow, but she's realizing how she used to act." I smiled, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. The relief was that something was finally changing, but the sadness came from the years I had spent carrying the weight of her expectations. But I was learning to let go of the past and move forward, step by step. A few days later, I got a text from Melissa. She asked if I would meet her for lunch. At first, I was hesitant. I wasn't sure what to expect. But I agreed. This was a chance to show her that I wasn't angry anymore, that I was ready to move forward. We met at a small cafe near the park, the same park where she used to take the kids when they were younger. When she arrived, she looked different. She wasn't the same Melissa I had known before. She was quieter, softer. There was no control, no manipulation in her words. "I've been to 4 therapy sessions now," she said, her voice tentative. "And each time I realize I've never really listened to anyone. Not Josh, not Mom and Dad, and especially not you." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I understand," I said slowly, "but understanding doesn't mean accepting." She looked down, almost ashamed. "I think being the oldest and growing up as the only adult in the house for a while, I got used to thinking everything should revolve around me. When I had kids, I panicked, and instead of asking for help the right way, I just expected it. Especially from you." I felt a deep sense of empathy for her, but I couldn't just brush everything aside. "I respect your role as a mother, Melissa. But you can't expect me to sacrifice my life just because you're unhappy with the one you chose." Her face softened, and she nodded, looking at me with a mix of regret and acceptance. "I've learned a lot these past few weeks. And I'm starting to see things differently. Josh hired a full-time nanny last week. Ava will help with school runs and teach the kids basic life skills. I'm not asking for your help anymore. I just hope one day you'll see that I'm changing." I looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. There was no animosity, no resentment. I could see the change in her, and I could see that it was genuine. The changes in Melissa weren't just about her behavior. They had a ripple effect on the rest of the family. My mom started to reach out more often, but not in the way she used to. She didn't ask for help, she asked if I wanted to spend time with her. My dad, too, seemed to be more involved in my life. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was being treated as an adult, as someone whose feelings mattered. 3 weeks after my post went viral, I got an unexpected message. It was from Josh. "I'd like to meet in person. Just you and me. Not through Melissa, not through your parents." We met at a quiet cafe, and Josh sat down, looking tired but clear-eyed. "Thank you for being brave enough to speak up," he said. His voice was calm but sincere. I knew Melissa had control issues, but I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. I smiled faintly. "I don't blame you," I said softly. "But it's hard to believe you didn't notice." He shook his head. "She told me she gave you money. Even described it in detail, cash in an envelope. But I checked the bank statements. She only gave you money for pizza a couple of times. The rest, she kept." I felt a dry laugh escape me. "If there was an envelope, it must have been meant for someone else." Josh looked at me, serious now. "I'm going to make her apologize. I'll make sure she pays you back everything she owes." I didn't respond immediately. My thoughts were racing. Could this really be the change I had hoped for? I wasn't sure yet, but I was beginning to believe that something real was happening. The change was subtle at first, like the quiet dawn of a new day. But as time passed, it became clear that the dynamics within my family were shifting, and I was no longer the person I used to be. The woman who always said yes, who bent over backward to please everyone, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had learned to protect her peace, her boundaries, and her voice. It wasn't easy, though. The family dynamics were deeply ingrained, and it took time for everyone to adjust. For years, I had been the one who picked up the slack, the one who filled in the gaps. But now, as I held my ground, I could see my family starting to shift, too. My mom, especially, seemed to be learning something new. Instead of demanding my time or expecting me to babysit, she started asking me how I was doing, what I wanted. It was a small change, but it was meaningful. One day, Mom called me out of the blue. I was sitting at my favorite coffee shop, catching up on some work, when her number appeared on my phone. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to expect. But when I answered, her tone was different. "Julia, I've been thinking," she started, "about what you said, about always feeling overlooked. I never realized how much I put on you." Her words caught me off guard. For years, I had felt invisible, like a second-choice option. But now, she was admitting that she had contributed to that. She was apologizing. "I'm sorry, honey," she said. "I didn't see it before. I didn't understand how hard it was for you. I want to do better." And for the first time, I believed her. I didn't expect everything to change overnight. I didn't expect all the old patterns to disappear at once. But I could feel something shifting in the way my family treated me. My dad, too, started to be more present in a way that felt less transactional. He wasn't just asking for help anymore, he was actually interested in what was going on in my life, but the most significant change was with Melissa. She had started therapy, and it was clear that she was doing the hard work of looking inward. It wasn't easy. And it wasn't always pretty, but she was trying. And I could see it. One day, after a particularly difficult therapy session, Melissa texted me, "I'm sorry for everything, Julia. I've been so focused on myself that I forgot about you. I'm working on it." I could feel the weight of her words. For the first time, I could see that she wasn't justifying her behavior. She wasn't trying to make me feel guilty. She was simply acknowledging that she had been wrong. And that was a huge step. A few weeks later, Melissa asked if I'd meet her for lunch. I agreed, knowing that this conversation could go either way. When we met, she was quiet at first, but then she started to open up. "I didn't realize how much I relied on you," she admitted, her voice soft but sincere. "And I didn't understand how it was affecting you. I've been so caught up in my own world that I never stopped to think about how you were feeling." I listened, letting her speak. I didn't interrupt, even though my mind was racing. "I understand," I said finally, "but it's not just about understanding. It's about respect. I can't keep putting my life on hold to make room for yours. You have to find your own balance, and so do I," she nodded slowly, looking down at her hands. "I get it," she said. "And I want to do better. I don't want to keep making the same mistakes." That moment felt like a turning point. It wasn't about forgiving everything in the past. It wasn't about pretending that everything was perfect. But it was about acknowledging the damage that had been done and making a commitment to change. After that conversation, I noticed a shift in Melissa. She wasn't perfect, she still had moments when she expected too much from me, but she was trying. And that was all I could ask for. We started to have real conversations, not just about the kids or family obligations, but about life, about who we were becoming. It was hard, but it was necessary. A few months later, I received an email from Josh, Melissa's husband. It was short but heartfelt. "I just wanted to say thank you for speaking up. I know it wasn't easy, but it's made a huge difference in how we all see things." Reading his words, I felt a wave of relief. For the first time in years, I felt like someone in my family truly had my back. Not because it was convenient or because they wanted something from me, but because they saw the truth of what I had been trying to say all along. The change in my family wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some fairy tale where everything was fixed in a single moment. But it was real. And it was enough. A few months after the trip, I received a message from my dad. It was simple, but it meant a lot. "Julia, your mom and I would like to take you out to dinner. Our treat. We've been talking, and we'd love to spend some time with you." I agreed, surprised that they were taking the initiative. When we met, there was no agenda, no pressure. Just a quiet dinner where we could all be together. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was just there to fulfill a role. I felt like I was there because I mattered. I've come to realize that change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, patience, and a willingness to stand firm in your beliefs, even when it's difficult. But when you start to set boundaries, when you start to protect your peace, you create space for something better to grow, and that's what I did. I stopped saying yes just to keep the peace. I started living for myself, and in doing so, I gave my family the chance to see me for who I really am. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. As the days went by, I felt a sense of calm I had never known before. I had finally taken control of my life, and while it wasn't a drastic change, it felt profound. I had been living in the shadows for so long, caught between family obligations and the expectations that were thrust upon me. But now, I was living for myself, and it felt like a weight had been lifted. One evening, after returning from a walk through the park, I received a call from my mom. It wasn't unusual for her to check in, but this time, there was something different in her voice. "Julia, I've been thinking," she said, her tone softer than usual, "about everything that's been going on. I've realized that I've been too focused on what I needed from you. And I never really considered what you might need." I listened, taken aback by her words. My mom wasn't someone who often admitted fault, so hearing her express this kind of self-awareness meant more than I could put into words. "I've been asking so much from you, and I haven't stopped to think about what you wanted. I'm sorry, honey. I never meant to take advantage of your kindness." Her apology wasn't the closure I thought I needed, but it was a start. I had never asked for apologies from my family, especially not from my mom, who always seemed to think she knew what was best for everyone. But now, it felt like we were finally having an honest conversation. "It's okay," I said, my voice steady. It's been a lot, Mom. I needed time for myself, and I needed you to see that." There was a pause before she replied, "I see that now, Julia. And I'm so sorry for not seeing it sooner." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that I hadn't expected. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen. Not as someone who was there to take care of everyone else, but as someone who had needs and feelings of her own. As the weeks passed, I noticed small changes in the way my family treated me. My dad, who had often been the quiet observer, started to reach out more. He would call to ask how my projects were going, to offer support when I needed it. It was a quiet kind of support. But it was genuine, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was being recognized as an individual, not just as a daughter who was expected to sacrifice everything. Melissa's journey was slower, but it was happening. She was still grappling with her role as a mother, but she was starting to see things from a new perspective. One afternoon, she sent me a text that read, "I've been thinking about what you said. I'm trying to do better, Julia. I don't want to keep making the same mistakes." Her words were a far cry from the defensiveness she had shown before. It was as if, after years of struggling with her own self-doubt, she was finally able to admit that she needed help. "I know I've put so much on you," she continued. "And I'm sorry for that. I'm learning, but it's hard. I don't know how to let go of the control." I took a deep breath before responding. "I know it's hard, Melissa. But you have to start somewhere. I've learned that I can't keep living for others. I can't be the one who holds everything together while everyone else falls apart. You need to find your balance, just like I had to find mine." That afternoon, we had a long conversation about boundaries, motherhood, and the weight of expectations. It wasn't easy, but it was real. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were finally talking about the things that mattered. The breakthrough didn't happen overnight. There were still moments of tension, especially when it came to Melissa's tendency to rely on me too much. But I held firm. I knew that if I didn't, the old patterns would resurface, and I would once again find myself slipping back into the role of the backup plan. Then, one day, I received a message from Josh, Melissa's husband. It was short, but it was enough to make me pause. "I just wanted to say thank you for speaking up. I don't know if Melissa would have gotten help if it weren't for you. I didn't see it before, but I see it now. Thank you." Reading his words, I felt a sense of relief. I had always felt like I was fighting a battle on my own. But now it seemed like Josh was finally understanding what I had been trying to say for so long. It wasn't just about me standing up for myself, it was about giving everyone the space to grow and learn from their mistakes. I didn't expect everything to be fixed overnight. I didn't expect Melissa to change instantly, nor did I expect my parents to completely understand my needs right away. But what mattered was that they were trying. And for the first time in a long while, I was no longer carrying the weight of the family on my shoulders alone. As the months passed, things gradually improved. Melissa continued with her therapy, and she started to show more awareness of how her actions affected others. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And progress, no matter how small, was enough. The most significant change, however, was within me. I had found my voice, and I had learned the importance of standing up for myself. I had spent too many years saying yes just to keep the peace, just to make others happy. But now, I was choosing to live for me. I was choosing my peace, my happiness, and my future. And that was worth everything. The new chapter in my life didn't arrive in a grand moment of revelation. It wasn't a singular day when everything changed. It was a gradual process, marked by moments of quiet realization and subtle transformations. The decisions I made, both small and large, were reshaping not just my relationships but also the way I saw myself in the world. I remember the first time I truly noticed the difference. It was a Saturday morning, and I had decided to spend the day at the local farmers market. It wasn't something I had ever done before. I was always too busy, too concerned with what everyone else needed, but today was different. I was doing something for me, just because I wanted to. As I walked through the market, I couldn't help but notice how free I felt. The air smelled of fresh produce, and the sounds of vendors calling out their offerings seemed almost cheerful. I could hear people laughing, chatting, and even the faint music from a nearby street musician. I walked slowly, taking it all in. It wasn't about buying anything, it was about being present, about finding joy in the little things that had always been there, just waiting for me to notice. It was in this moment that I realized something profound. I had spent so many years living my life for others, trying to fulfill roles that were never truly mine to play. I had been the sister who always said yes, the daughter who never wanted to disappoint, and the friend who never set boundaries. But in this simple, peaceful moment at the market, I was just Julia. And that felt like freedom. I spent the morning browsing the stalls, chatting with vendors, and even picking up a few flowers. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it was enough. I had always been the one to skip out on things like this, too focused on others or too worried about what might happen if I took time for myself. But now, I was allowing myself to breathe, to exist for no reason other than to be in the moment. Later that afternoon, I received a call from Melissa. I hesitated for a moment before answering, unsure of how things would go. But I reminded myself that I had grown, and this conversation would be different. It had to be. "Hey Julia," Melissa's voice was softer than usual, almost hesitant. "I've been thinking about what you said, and I know I haven't been the best. I've been putting a lot on you, and that's not fair." I was quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. It wasn't often that Melissa admitted fault, let alone apologized for her actions. But here she was, doing both. "I know you've been struggling," I said carefully. "And I respect that. But I can't be the person you lean on all the time. I need to take care of myself too." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she responded. "I understand, Julia. I think I've been too wrapped up in my own world to see how much you've been carrying. I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner." Her apology was raw, sincere, and I could tell she meant it. I was taken aback by how much she had changed. This wasn't the Melissa I had known for years, the one who thought the world should revolve around her. This was a version of her who was finally starting to recognize the importance of others, starting to realize that her way wasn't the only way. "Thank you for saying that," I replied softly. "I don't want you to feel like you're alone, but I can't keep being the person you turn to every time things get tough. I need to focus on myself too." It wasn't the easiest conversation, and it wasn't the end of all our problems. But it was a step forward. And that, in itself, was progress. As the days passed, I continued to focus on building my own life. I kept working at my interior design firm, diving into new projects and making time for things that filled me with joy. I began to say yes to things I had always wanted to do but had put off: weekend trips, art exhibits, and evenings spent reading without interruptions. I was rediscovering the parts of myself I had buried under years of self-sacrifice. Melissa's transformation wasn't immediate, but it was evident. She started making changes in her own life, seeking therapy as she worked through the complexities of motherhood and self-worth. There were still moments of tension, but I noticed something different about her. She was trying. And that was all I needed to see. One afternoon, Melissa and I sat down together at a cafe. There were no kids around, no distractions, just the two of us. It felt like a rare moment of peace between us, and I could feel the weight of years of frustration lifting. "I've been working on myself, Julia," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "I know I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've hurt you. But I'm trying to be better." I smiled, feeling a weight lift off my chest. "I can see that, Melissa. And I'm proud of you for making those changes. But you have to understand, it's not about being perfect. It's about learning, growing, and doing better next time." For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were talking as equals, as sisters. No longer was I the one who had to constantly bend to her will. We were finding our balance, one step at a time. As the months went by, things continued to improve. My relationship with my parents deepened, and while it wasn't always perfect, there was a new sense of understanding between us. My dad, in particular, began reaching out more, showing support in ways I had never seen before. For the first time, I felt like my needs were being considered, and it was a quiet but powerful change. The biggest shift, however, was in how I saw myself. I had spent so long trying to please everyone, trying to keep the peace, and constantly putting my needs on the back burner. But now, I was putting myself first. I wasn't afraid to say no when I needed to, and I wasn't afraid to set boundaries. As I stood at the edge of the beach that day, watching the waves crash against the shore, I realized that my journey wasn't about getting everything right. It was about learning to stand my ground, to recognize my worth, and to stop sacrificing myself for the sake of others. I had finally learned that self-love wasn't selfish, it was necessary. The following months felt different, almost like a new chapter in the book of my life. I no longer felt like a backup plan or a second choice. I was finally living for myself, doing the things I loved, carving out space for my dreams, and nurturing my own happiness. The transformation I had been hoping for had slowly begun, and while it wasn't perfect, it was real. One of the most significant changes came in the form of my relationship with Melissa. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't an overnight fix. But we had finally begun to speak to each other as equals. There were still moments of tension, moments when the old patterns tried to resurface, but we were learning. We were learning to give each other space. To listen more, and most importantly, to respect each other's boundaries. One evening, after a long day of work, I decided to take a walk along the beach near my apartment. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the ocean, and the air was cool and refreshing. I walked in silence, listening to the sound of the waves crashing gently against the shore, letting the quiet wash over me. That was when I received a message from Melissa. It wasn't a long text, but it was the kind of message I had been waiting for. "I've been thinking about everything we talked about. I'm proud of you, Julia. You've always been stronger than I realized." It was a simple message, but it meant everything to me. After everything that had happened, the frustration, the tears, the years of feeling overlooked, this message felt like validation. I wasn't looking for praise or recognition, but hearing her acknowledge my growth was the kind of breakthrough I never knew I needed. A few weeks later, my parents invited me to dinner at our favorite restaurant. It was the kind of dinner we hadn't had in years, no guilt, no expectations, just us, sitting down as a family. It wasn't about fixing everything, but it was a start. As I sat across from my mom, I could see how much things had changed. She wasn't pressuring me to do things for the family, she was simply enjoying the moment with me, and that felt like progress. "Julia," my mom said, looking at me with a gentle smile. "I know I've made mistakes. I haven't always seen you the way I should have, and for that, I'm sorry." Those words were more powerful than anything she could have said before. She wasn't perfect, but she was trying. And that was enough. It was enough to make me realize that healing wasn't just about setting boundaries, it was about forgiveness too. Not just forgiving others, but forgiving myself for the years I spent playing a role I never agreed to. That night, as I walked home, I felt lighter. I had finally learned to stand up for myself, and the world around me was beginning to understand that I wasn't going to be the person I had always been. I was no longer living in the shadow of my family's expectations. I was stepping into the light of my own life, and that felt more powerful than anything I had ever done before. The next few months followed a similar pattern: the work, the time for myself, the occasional family dinner, and the ongoing improvements in my relationships. I began traveling more, taking short trips to explore new cities, visit art exhibits, and simply be alone with my thoughts. I started writing again, something I hadn't done in years. I felt like I was rediscovering parts of myself that I had long forgotten. Through all of this, Melissa continued her therapy sessions. We had more honest conversations than I could count. There were moments of awkwardness, but there was also progress. Slowly, we were learning to navigate each other's boundaries and to support each other without the old patterns of control and resentment. One day, Melissa called me. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the sincerity in it. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "For making me see things differently. For making me stop and think. I don't know where I'd be without that push." It wasn't the same as before. There were no demands, no guilt trips. It was just her acknowledging the change, and for once, I felt like we were on the same page. But the biggest change came when my mom called me one evening. She asked if I wanted to join her and Dad on a trip to the mountains. It wasn't a big family event, no strings attached. Just a getaway for the three of us. The old Julia would have felt guilty for even considering it, but the new Julia, well, she was going to take the opportunity to relax and enjoy the peace. I agreed, and for the first time in a long time, it wasn't about what anyone else wanted. It was about me. I was finally taking the time I needed to recharge, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. I was doing something for myself, and that was okay. The trip was simple. It wasn't glamorous, but it was exactly what I needed. I spent the days hiking, reading by the fire, and simply enjoying the silence. The mountains were peaceful. And for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace with myself. When I returned, I was a different person. My relationships were healthier, my boundaries were stronger, and my confidence was growing every day. I wasn't the person I had been, and I wasn't the person my family had expected me to be. I was Julia, just Julia. As time went on, I found that my life was becoming more and more my own. I wasn't bound by expectations anymore. I wasn't playing the role of the backup plan. I was living the life I had always wanted, and though it wasn't always easy, it was real. And that, in the end, was enough. The final thoughts: the journey wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about getting everything right all at once. It was about learning to respect my own needs, learning to say no when I needed to, and learning to love myself first. By doing that, I was finally able to give my family what they needed, without sacrificing myself in the process, and that, I think, is the real lesson. When you stand up for yourself, when you respect your own boundaries, you don't just change your own life, you change the way others see you too. It's not easy. It's not always pretty. But it's worth it. Because in the end, you're the only one who can make sure your story is told the way you want it to be.